From Smash University, and today we're going to talk about old and new fighting games. Yes, you are correct. You are stuck in a time loop. The infinite Tsukiyomi. This is always the story we got to talk about when it comes to the fighting game community. This is happening on the traditional fighting game community side on Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8. People, Street Fighter 6, exiting the honeymoon phase. People are desperate for some changes right now. They feel like they've been playing the same game for a bit. Tekken 8, people are just upset the game is not really working per se, and also top players are like, hey, this is not the game I love, right? Which is the classic response as always, because the worst game you're playing is always the current one, and then the best one is always the current game you're playing rolled back one, right? That's just how it goes. So in the Smash side of things, it's interesting because right now that's happening in terms of Smash 4, right? Smash 4, if you don't know, just had a swan song, had a coin box, to honor the ending and the closing of the Nintendo servers. All right, this online service for Smash Wii U is done, right? So that's closed down. Sucks, but that is what it is. And so people were trying to going back once again, talking about Smash 4. And Smash 4 just being this incredible, brilliant game.
Right now. How is this a
Smash
disaster?
4.
This is a massive success. And plus we have the exhibition happening later.
Everyone wants to play. So let's go check it out. Ah, yes. The peak gaming right here. Quality in the middle of the game, you're close. Oh, actually, I just lost the whole game. Sick. Good old Smash 4, right? Smash 4, when you're, close, you lose the stock, and you're immediately in the worst position, where you can either just get completely two-stocked, or it could be a close game again, right? That was Smash 4 in a nutshell. Pretty ridiculous. So, Sajam just made a video talking about what made old fighting games so different. This is a really good game. Really good video, rather, about fighting games in general. And as always, for those of you who do extend, and try to look outside of your own, the own platform fighting game community bubble, quality guy to follow, of course. Sajam's got some good stuff. Shout outs to Majin Obama, always jamming it. Brian F. Diaphone as well has been doing a lot of great things. You can see two of them here. So really beautiful stuff, man. And so I want to talk about it, right? Let's talk about this, because one of the things that Sajam does talk about in this video, which I really like, is talking about what actually, let's be objective here about what was actually really good about old fighting games, right? And why is there such a disconnect there, right, for people. Right, for old heads and young heads and stuff, right? So, I'll talk about it. I'm a OG in the streets now. I'm an unk out here. So, for me, we talk about Smash 4. What was great about Smash 4? So Smash 4 had really interesting stuff, right? So you can see right there, the pivot up tilt, just kind of general combos here. But then you see this, right? So what happens in this, it's called a frame cancel, right? And what happens in frame cancel is when you're supposed to be both experiencing hit lag, your character lands, and so because they land, they go into their landing frames, and so they exit the hit lag while your opponent is still in hit lag. So you get more frame advantage than you usually should be getting. So it allowed for some interesting combos and interactions for the game, right? Combo, Falco, Falco had some things, man. I remember when I first did this video and I was just labbing this character more, I'm like, damn, this character's kind of OD. Right? You'd be jamming it. And then a lot of times what people will talk about here is the movement, right? Shout outs to Cupid, got the tunes on. But a lot of it was that quality movement, right? So you see the perfect pivots happening there, right? And also the stutter steps. Yeah, it's a perfect pivot and then stutter steps. So stutter steps, right, were interesting because in order to dash dance in these older games, right, In particular, Brawl and Smash 4. Obviously, Melee, you could just dash dance, right? Very lenient dash dance. You could only dash dance within the first few frames. After that, you cannot dash back. You can go into a run. If you try to dash, your character will just do a skid animation to try to turn around, right? So why was this important? So in order to actually dash dance in Smash 4 and in Brawl 2, you essentially had to do a stutter step. You had to dash the same direction again and then cancel that dash with the dash to the opposite direction. And that's how that's the way you would turn around. That's the only way you'd be able to turn around, right? And do something that resembled doing dash dancing, right? So that's where it came from in these games. So the reason why, like, you had to have the level up, straight up, right? And that's kind of what's interesting in old fighting games. In old fighting games, basic movement and even like some of the advanced movement, it was locked behind larger execution checks than you have in modern fighters, right? A lot of modern fighters, they intentionally, due to have, input readers, understanding and adding shortcuts to doing inputs because they understand how sloppy human inputs can be and human error. They kind of account for that now. They're more intentional when they build out moves in that way. And so it's like a combination of that. Then you have buffer systems, right, that are better. They usually tend to be larger than they were in the old fighting games, if they had any. And you lead in a situation where there are certain parts of the game that people just couldn't unlock, right? Unless you had practiced it hard or it came easy to you or whatever it may be, right? And so that was always the kind of interesting thing in old fighting games, right? That people talk about, you could see player expression. And to a certain extent, that was true. I will say, and we'll go into it a little bit later on, I will say, though, part of that also has to deal with information, right? And lack of optimization, right? So we'll talk about that as we go through. But even like this, right? So, we'll look at a video of myself playing, right? And this is me. This is me playing back in the day, right?
Just in case.
And you'll see some of it in a little bit here, right? You see that dash dance, right? Going back, gonna step out doing an up smash, don't get it, end up dying there. But even kind of that dash dance, right? And that kind of movement, that was something that just was not a thing for most people in terms of their standard play, right? Definitely people that were, assuming to be my level or whatever too. But that kind of movement wasn't done from many people, right? Even that kind of step dash right there. There's only a few characters that can really leverage that. Meta Knight and Roy being one of them. And of course, Bayo. Bayo had a great one. But this was stuff that you wouldn't see from most people. So because most people couldn't move that way, they couldn't really leverage some of the strengths that Roy had, right? I love it, dude. I love it. Get hit with the run up DP, dude. The classic.
Run up B.
Shout out to Young Bam. Still a goon, dude. That fool's a goon, man. What is wrong with that guy? Get him out of here. That was something that it was just unique to people, right? So that's where character playstyles would be found, right? I remember Gamer B, right, for Smash, for not Smash, for SF4, right? And you would see how he would play Adon would just be so different, right? And a lot of it was like when you look at the difference, it'd be like, certain people would be able to do these cool, unique combos that other people wouldn't really be able to do. And again, it was like part of this kind of like just the unknown and the optimization, right? And lack thereof, right? So a lot of those things, because there was no distinct like, hey, this is how we should be playing the game, or this is what is optimal. You had people express themselves in little different ways, right? And that was kind of the interesting thing. Like these days, when you see someone do like a sick combo, you're just like, oh, this person's trying to style because of the stream. But if they're not trying to style because of the stream, they'll be like, hey, that's unoptimal. Why are you doing that, right? Just again, it was just a different line of thinking, right? But then you also had stuff like this, right? This is where, this objectively, just a kind of difference in older fighting games, right? So you not only had what we talked about before, where basic movement and advanced movement was just different, right? But you also had situations like this, right? Where you had characters and you had different thing mechanics that maybe would be found, maybe wouldn't be found. But either way, they would stay in the game. Games won't really be patched, right? The patch would be the new game, right? The patch to Street Fighter 4 is going to be Super Street Fighter 4, right? The patch to if you're okay, Super Street Fighter 2, I'm going to play ST, those were the patches, right? These new iterations of the game. Even you have, the standard melee out here, right? And then you have the PAL version, right? Those were the patches per se that you would see. It was interesting how those things shifted, right? And so you have things like this, right? Ganon just flying to the skies. What is such a hilarious tech, right? But you didn't have that. That wasn't a thing, right? Back in the day. It's so fascinating. Those things just back in the day, you would just have people just doing this stuff like that, and that would stay, right? You didn't have that being patched out. You didn't have all those shifted. So you just had to learn how to play with how the game was, right? And so another thing too, when you talk about it, it was okay, you talk about the exploration, right? You talk about the unknown. You talk about the discovery, right? The general shock value, the information war that you would usually have when you're building out these games. And it was cool to see because people didn't know what people knew. People weren't connected to each other. You didn't have the social media. You didn't have YouTube, all these content creators building out things, right? So a lot of things were just different in that kind of landscape, right? Nowadays, if I go ahead and I'm okay, let me find out about neutral. Look at this, man. I go down here. You know what I mean? I just put neutral, right? How to improve my neutral. Right? Look at this. Look at this. So many different, there's just tons of videos going on. And there's so many more, right, that you can find that will help you learn about neutral. You didn't have this back in the day. I remember back in the day for even Brawl, right? You had to be at a certain level and win certain tournaments as a Meta Knight, and then you'd get a secret book, right? It was a tome. You had to it was ridiculous, right? You had to summon the god of Sakurai, freaking baptize your controller, spin around in 3 circles, and Jason Zimmerman would give you a text document to learn how to do secret tech. AKA do reverse down smash that no one could punish at the time because everyone sucked at those things because, again, information and terrible training modes, right? So that was the old ways, right? And so there was a part of the uniqueness you'd get from and the cool feeling would it'd be oh man, you're in the zone, you know how to move in your game, and it feels dope. Right? It feels like you just yo, this is fire. I'm moving, and guess what? I know nobody in 100,000 mile radius can move like me. Right? But that stuff got easier and that stuff got more known, so more people can do it. And now the search was no longer to find the cool new stuff or express how you play or do all these things. Now it's either you're doing the cool shit for content or whatever, or you play optimal, right? So when you going back to what I'm talking about in terms of the old games, right? You'll understand that old games sounds very similar to a particular phrase, right? And a certain stage that we usually talk about in fighting games. The exploration, the unknown, the information war, right? The discovery, the honeymoon phase in fighting games. So, because of the lack of information, those moments for fighting games, old fighting games, was just stretched out, right? There's a reason why games you could play on the same patch and people will be finding new stuff. People will be finding new stuff. People will be finding new stuff, right? And it would just take time. It would just take so much time. By that time, usually another new game comes out. So these games weren't even solved then, right? Even though they had like no patch. And there's a lot of big reason for that because you just had this time where like people just weren't connected. So that was like the really interesting thing for like new fighting games, right? Because now people are connected, games get solved, right? People have a structure on even their approach to how they learn a new fighting game, right? Because they know I need to learn my neutral. I need to know my damaging buttons here. I know my character excels at this, right? I have my Oki. I have my corner pressure. Boom, boom, boom. Good, right? If I'm playing ultimate, okay, what's my character? What's my opening combo, right? At this percentage, where are my kill confirms? Okay. My character's good at juggling. Okay. My character's good at edge guarding. All right. What's my corner carry? What do I use to edge guard in these situations? Boom, boom, boom. Good, right? What's my out of shield, right? What's my revert? Like those, everyone breaks down games in that different way, right? In terms and it's more structured approach, right? And so not only is the player base being more structured, these games are more structured, right? They're more well-intentioned. But because of that, there's a less of the happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say. And so also that makes these newer games tend to be a bit more homogenized because of that as well, too. And what I love to use when I'm talking about old fighting games versus new fighting games, it's like sometimes I say it's like art versus science. Sometimes I like to say it's magic versus science, right? Old games being the art and the magic, and the new games being the science, right? I think magic is a really good one too because a lot of times when we talk about magic, it's it's unexplained phenomena, right? Versus science being explaining phenomena, breaking it down, being able to replicate, recreate, the goal of experimentation and the scientific method, right? That's how we move with a lot of things. And it exemplifies in that play. And the level of how we contextualize things in fighting games is different, right? And that's what I was saying earlier on when I'm talking about it's not just a product, right? Because the products in and of themselves have changed, right? New games have gotten easier. They've gotten more intentioned. There's less uniqueness because they don't leave in all the kind of we don't really know what this is and we're just going to do that. Also, they have this breadth of fighting games, so they kind of know what they want to do. Like most people go into a fighting game, they're just like, okay, I'm going to kind of do this and do something like this that mimics this. I'm going to shift this a little here, but this is also inspired by this, right? It's more intentional versus like, okay, I think this mechanic would be really cool. Let's kind of just do it and see what happens, right? And then we can kind of tweak it from there maybe. Or it's like, oh, well, that's just a game and hopefully they figure out some stuff and hopefully it works out. Who knows, right? That doesn't happen now for new fighting games. So that you have that more intentionality in how we play the game, the ecosystem and information, and also how the developers make the game, right? Information proliferation. You have it all growing, expanding, it's going everywhere, right? All this information's out there. And so as that continues to happen, things get a bit more homogenized, right? They get more structured. People they start to see it's no longer, oh, this cool thing, that person's expression, blah, blah, blah. It's no one's talking about that anymore. People are now talking about what is optimal, right? That's what I'm looking at. What is optimal? Not just playing the way I want to play. If I want to be the best player in the world, then I need to learn how to do what is the best thing in this situation. How do I make this lead into this, right? So it's structured. So one of the cool things too, for platform fighters though, is for most games, when a new game comes along, the previous game dies out for the most part. Still, some people will be left behind. People continue with the new game. Platform fighters is unique as, of course, we have Melee, right? And then you have Ultimate. So you had essentially a separation where some people continued on but a good amount of people on the kind of the major people that people knew, they stuck in with Melee. But it's funny because even Melee, right? There's such a change now in how old Melee was and how new Melee is. In fact, that's part of the discrepancy that's going on these days. People are playing in this way that is now this all the theory crafting back in the day has been done, has been realized, and then some, right? You're seeing Cody play, and he's playing this mythological fox that people used to talk about like it was in stories, and now that's just what we see on a daily basis, right? You see people less about, oh, this is cool and we're swagging here, and more like, okay, this is the optimal approach here. This is exactly what I need to do so I can win. And it's crazy because even like the old players the old gods, in order for them to keep up, they've had to optimize their play. And the ones who have not been able to optimize their play or lackluster, or some of them who were known for their quote unquote optimal play during that time period, right? Like M2K, who was known that way. It's like now everyone's playing that way, right? Now everyone is looking at optimizing like their approaches and their edge guards and their juggling, right? Their combo extensions, etc., right? So, people are losing out on their uniqueness there, right? And well, when back in the day, that was a unique trait, or play style of M2K. Now that's just how you play the game, right? So, and that's one of the interesting things to see for fighting games, right? And kind of where they're going, and that there's a beauty in it. I think the beauty that we see now in these games that are more solved, right? The games are more solved. Games get solved quickly, right? I think that's part of the reason. Even like people say, "Oh, we didn't have a patch back then." Well, dude, nowadays, like in the time period before by the time they even people will say people complain about patches, and they do. People complain and say, "I hope they patch this thing," right? There is that world that people live in, but also people, right? People who are working hard and jamming these games, dude, they learn these games so fast. Like it's crazy. They solve this stuff so quickly, right? Because there's just so many people. There's enough people hardworking around the world that get together and learn from this person to this person, from Singapore to Toronto to Sweden to South Africa to Nigeria to DR, back to Cali, right? People are always learning and improving in the game. And I think that's such a fascinating thing for fighting games. And it's a fascinating thing even for for Ultimate, kind of seeing where it's going to, right? Like you look at some of the old, like we just did this video, right, on the evolution of combos, right? Here. And it's like, it's interesting too, because when you look at this stuff, right, and you look at how people used to combo, right? Like we even like show back in the day, like what combos used to look like. And it's funny because like, it's just, right? You used to see this and be like, oh my gosh, right? We'd see this kind of basic hit and like only MK Leo can do that. And it's funny because now you're seeing MK Leo do this stuff and this is a sick combo. But at the same token too, is this like what a Joker should be going for, right? This is what they should be doing. So now it's not just, oh, this is MK Leo doing this. This is something that like, oh, this is just the optimal what should be done, right? And I love this, right? We're just kind of showing back and throw combos, and it's like, boom, that's it. That was a standard there in that kind of similar position, all right? So, yeah, it's very interesting to see kind of where fighting games, old and new, have moved. How that it's very intentional that nowadays fighting games are built in a way that it's supposed to be about building them up and trying to solve it. I think that's the biggest thing that we see. People are about solving it now that it's like these games get closer to solved more quickly. It's about how do we optimize here, and how do we take all these strategies and who's the best at their strategic thinking and execution, right? That's the big thing now. who's the best at applying these things and breaking it down versus back in the day if you had the information, right? Because some people, they could not be really good at fighting games, but they just knew that one thing that would win. And so it's like nobody could get past that level, so they just win, right? That used to happen back in the day. You know, I tend to be like, straight up, I was someone who could like break down games and stuff and really quickly. And that's how I like, there's a lot of people that I would beat from that alone, right? I could be someone who can learn and put in the time and effort and stuff too. But a lot of times, you know, I was too anxious. I'd try to force situations too much. But a lot of times I could do things to people that people didn't know or they didn't discover yet. And I'm like, I figured out this stuff way before. I've been doing this stuff for years. Some people just found this out 2 days ago, right? And so you can just run up on people. Can't do that anymore, right? It's like chess. People, grandmasters know these core strategies, right? All these iconic strategies, right? That's the game they play now, right? Versus back in the day, it's like, oh, I'm just moving my piece here and here. Oh, you're moving your piece like that? Oh, that's kind of cool. Is that kind of your way to style? Like, nah, that don't work anymore. That don't fly anymore. You know, we take structured approaches to things now. So it is the beauty and the curse, right? As fighting games kind of move forward, you're going to see things like that. I think one thing is, for me personally, someone who loves putting effort into movement and being able to move like no one else, I do miss some of that. But I think there's different ways to still reward that kind of play while still allowing people to be able to play the game, right? Because there would be certain games where it's like, okay, I can just outspeed you and you can't do anything. I don't need to be smarter than you. I can just do this movement that you just can't do and I already win, right? So I do like that they've made movement easier in games so people can't just necessarily do that. You see that in a lot of the new platform fighters, right? Which I think is really cool. And I do like that we're seeing more kind of, it's about nuanced decision making. It's very interesting too, because it ties into how our world is today, right? And so, you know, real quick, you know, for me, because right now I'm reading this book. Well, it's one of the books I'm reading right now, you know, Michael Lewis, The Undoing Project, right? And, you know, pretty interesting so far. You know, talking about the money ball and talking about kind of changes and shifts that have happened in, I would say like just what has happened in expertise starting off in baseball, right? And then he talks about it in basketball as well. But it's just interesting how the world has shifted on how they deal with tech and knowledge, and how you had experts. And back in the day, people had experts who were trying to choose and trying to figure out, you know, scout out who would be the next best player or whatever. And they'd be terrible at it, you know, but you just assume these people are experts. They've been in the scene a long time, or they're ex-players or whatever. So they must know, right? They must know how we should go about these things, you know. But the thing about it is, there is a lot of times people don't really know how they choose things or how they go about it, right? They kind of have it's a gut feeling, whatever. And it's like, then data shows that, that stuff's not really working. But there's like this weird combination of like, you need to be able to get a ton of data sets and have that stuff in a way of like using technology to really grab all these data sets and break down things that, you know, human eyes would miss, but then also using human eyes to look at that data and then, you know, that aggregated data and why those decisions were made, and utilizing, you know, subject matter experts in tandem with data-driven research, right, and insights is really what makes things pop, right? And that's what you see now in marketing. That's what you see everywhere, right? How do we utilize subject matter experts in tandem with insights teams, right? And that's kind of where new games are, right? It's no longer about who's finding the information. That's how it used to be back in the day. I mean, even if you were trying to look great in the market, right, in terms of business, are you the one who found the information? Are you the one who found the new stuff? Nowadays, it's not so much about you finding the new stuff. It's about, okay, the skill set that you need to have in the information age is how are you good at discerning information? Are you good at shifting through information and identifying what is important, what matters, right? And that's kind of what they look for in a lot of fighting games. So it's kind of really interesting that the world in and of itself has shifted into this ideology. And then we're also seeing that in fighting games, right? Where it's like, okay, we're getting now to this strategy side, right? Now everyone can find this information out there. Heck, now it's like you have fighting game social media sometimes that they try to teach you stuff, right? And try to get you to the point. Back in the day, you didn't get that. You know, you gotta prime a guide and that's it. But you know, you have people actually trying to help you out, trying to learn the game, which is dope. And then aside from that, it's like, okay, cool. Now I guess I need to figure it out. You have that now. You have people teaching you. You have ways, and so people are about, okay, strategy, you know? And I think there is no coincidence that we've seen games that involve more of that kind of thinking. I think Smash always fundamentally incorporated that kind of thinking in terms of like nuanced decision making. I think it's even more now with a combination of rage and the percent system. Just is like that. It's interesting because Street Fighter 6, that's what they do with the drive gauge. You know, how do you manage your offense and defense, and how do you go about making your decisions in the present, also accounting for potential futures, right? You know, do I do this? Am I going to burn myself out and put myself in a situation where I could lose the whole game, even though I got optimal damage here, right? It's like, those are the kind of things that you need to think about in these new fighting games. So it's really interesting. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope it was cool. Much love. I'm gonna start doing more content like this because, you know, I want to have some discussions with the people about some of these topics, you know, as they kind of move through the industry, you know, and move through the scene. So hope you all enjoyed. Gonna be working on some more stuff too. Gonna be more open, more available. So yeah, man, hope you all loved it, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.